Hello there, and welcome to this crash course on building Nuxt modules. What we will be doing today is we will be recreating a module that I have already created, which is Nuxt Medusa, but we will be focusing on all the basics about building Nuxt modules. So if you are not familiar with Medusa, Medusa is an open source e-commerce platform, and we will be using it to create a module that would allow Nuxt users to easily create e-commerce applications with it. So at the end of the video, I will be also sharing some tips and tricks in terms of building modules so that they are better for both user and developer experience. Let's go. The best place to start learning about building Nuxt modules is the official documentation by Nuxt called Module Author Guide. It shows you step by step how to build your Nuxt module, how to create an ecosystem around it, and basically everything what you will need to create a new module. So to create a new module, we will be using this command here, and I have already generated the template here, and we will talk about it in a second. The module we will be building today is a simpler version of the Nuxt Medusa module that I have already created, and you can check it out by searching in GitHub Nuxt-Medusa. I have also created a video about using this particular module in Nuxt that you can check out on my YouTube channel. It's called Nuxt Medusa Tailwind CSS Crash Course. Today we will be using the endpoint from the official nextmedusajs.com website to connect to this Medusa.js client. So this Medusa.js client will require us to pass the base URL of the backend that we will be using. So we will be using the same backend as it is here. So in your example, you most probably won't be using it. You will be probably using your own Medusa backend. So the approach here might be a bit different. So let's go to the code and see how Nuxt modules are structured. So this is the template that was generated by this command, and it contains some configuration file for Nuxt and for Vite, but we will be focusing more on the SRC and the playground today. So if we expand SRC, there will be one file and one folder here. Module.ts is the most important file for your module. It contains all the configuration and the functionality of the module that is registered while using it in another Nuxt app. So going through this file, the first thing we see is this interface called module options. This module options interface will have the configuration, the TypeScript declaration of your configuration of the module. So in here we can, for example, say API key string, right? And more configuration when needed. So in our case, we will be using something else, so I will undo it. Next, we have this define Nuxt module method. This module method is imported from NuxtKit, and it's used to register the module, the Nuxt module. And it accepts an object which comes with some parameters. So it has the meta, and the meta will have the name of the module and the config key. Name is just the unique name of our module. So in our case, we can just say Nuxt Medusa. And the config key is quite useful. It will be used in the playground as well. So in short words, config is used when a user wants to pass some configuration for the module, and he wants to use the config key. So here it is my module, but we will replace it to Medusa. So it will be easier to distinguish which configuration options are for this Medusa module. Then we have the defaults, which are the default configuration options, because we can allow user to add some module options, but we also can register some defaults. Maybe some API keys or URLs can be defined from some environment variables, or they can basically be taken as a default. Maybe it is a flag for being a global module, or some kind of server-only module or client-only module. In here, we can say, for example, that the server will be false. Next, we have the setup function, and this setup function is used to basically run the logic of your module. It accepts two parameters, options and Nuxt, and we can then create a resolver that will be used to resolve the paths of our module, and we can add a plugin. So the plugin will be used to, for example, connect to Medusa. So we use this resolver to resolve the path to this plugin. So let's save it for now, and let's go to the runtime and plugin. So this plugin, it is using, or it is exporting a define Nuxt plugin method. And for now, what it does, it is just console logging some text like plugin injected by my module. But in here, what we will do is later on, we will add this logic to connect to Medusa, so that the user can then easily connect it from the front-end application. So this is it for now for the module. Let's go to the playground. And in this playground, what we have is we have like the example Nuxt application with Nuxt config and the app.vue as well. So in Nuxt config, I mentioned this config key. So previously it was set to my module. So let's change it to Medusa. We also see the type completion, auto-completion. And if we run this project, because what it does right now, it is just displaying the Nuxt module playground. So if we run it with yarn dev, in your case it might be different package manager, for me it's yarn, and we go to localhost 3000, we see this Nuxt module playground. And if we inspect, I may just increase it a bit so it's better visible here and here as well. In the console, we will see plugin injected by my module, which is basically the text that we can locate here, plugin injected by my module. So this is how this basic template works. So let's now change it into this Nuxt Medusa module. So first thing we need to do here is we need to install the Medusa.js package. And I have already done that in my package.json to just not waste your time to see how I'm installing the package. So it is already installed. And next thing we need to do is we need to import it in a file and basically create a new Medusa connection. So how we will do that is we will go to the plugin.ts here, and in here what we will need to do is we need to, or let's go to the module first, it will be easier. So in the module, what we need to do is we need to pass some configuration options to the module so that the user can provide required configuration for Medusa to work, and it is located right here, and it needs the max retries, which is basically the amount of times a request is retried, and the base URL to your Medusa backend. So we need those two properties. So we can add them manually, but we can also do something like this, which will basically use the type from Medusa that has the same properties. So we can just copy this config, make this interface a type, and then do something like this. So right now we know that the module options is the same as the config. And right now you see that the defaults here are highlighted because we are missing some properties. We are missing properties for max retries. So let's set them to 3, which is also what is recommended by Medusa. And for base URL, what we can do here is we can add some, let's say, URL where your e-commerce or Medusa backend is running. So by default, Medusa backend is running on HTTP localhost 9000. So let's put it here. Next, we need to pass this configuration from the module itself to the runtime config, because we will be using runtime config to pass the configuration generated here to the underlying plugin. So what I will do just below this resolver here is I will say Nuxt options runtime config public.medusa, and I will set the value of this Medusa configuration in the runtime config to defu, and defu is a tool that is used to merge two configuration objects into one in a quite efficient way. So you would need to install it. I have already done that, but in your case you will probably need to install it manually. So I add the import of defu right here. And this defu, what it will do is it will merge two objects. So I want to merge this object if it was already defined by the user. And in here, what I want is I want to the structure and spread the basically the options here, because maybe user want to pass some options, so they will be merged automatically. Let's just save this file and go to the plugin, because here there will be a logic for our module. So I will need to import Medusa as it is shown here in the documentation. So import Medusa from Medusa.js, and we need to create this new Medusa client. So I will remove this console log because it's not needed anymore. And what we need right now is we need to get the configuration from the use runtime config. So I will also import the use runtime config like this, and I will destructure the Medusa from use runtime config, and specifically the public one, because in our module we are adding this to the public. And we have const Medusa client, which equals new Medusa. And in here we need to pass the config. So we have the config here in Medusa. So maybe let's map this Medusa to something else like config, and let's pass this config here. And the final thing we need to do here, because we already have this Medusa client registered in the plugin, is we need to provide this client to the user so that he can easily use it in the playground or in his application. So to do that, we need to go Nuxt app and then provide. So we are providing this functionality to the user. And the first parameter here is the name under which the user will be able to access this Medusa client. So we will say Medusa, and we will pass Medusa client like this. So what is happening right now? I will stop the server because we will need to add some changes to it. What will happen here is we are defining the plugin. We are getting the configuration that is passed from the user, and it is merged with the defaults. We are registering a new Medusa client, and we are providing this Medusa client to the user by accessing the Medusa from Nuxt app. So what we need to do right now is we have the module, we have the plugin, we would need to pass some configuration here. So Medusa accepts base URL, and this base URL, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we will take this link from the official Nuxt Medusa playground, which is basically this. And max retries we can also set to 3, the same as it was. We would need to add something else here, because Medusa by default selects and configures some course options that is only set to certain URL or host with the port. So this one here accepts the nextmedusajs.com and localhost 8000. Nuxt by default runs on port 3000. So what we need to do here is we need to say dev server and set the port to 8000. This means that our Nuxt server will be running on port 8000, and it will allow to fetch the data from this production like starter Heroku app, where this Medusa e-commerce application is running, so that we won't be blocked by coarse configuration. In your case, when you will be using your local environment, your local Medusa application, or the one hosted by you, you probably won't need to register it, but this is for this example. So let's save it. And what we should be able to do right now is in our playground, I think I can run the application. So I will do yarn dev prepare, which will create all the types for the playground. I will run the application yarn dev, and now I will access localhost 8000. We see the same Nuxt module playground because we haven't changed that. So in the script tag of this app.vue, I will change it also to lang.ts. In order to access this Medusa client here, we need to access Nuxt app. So I will say const equals use Nuxt app. And from here, I will extract Medusa. This needs to be with the prefix of $. This is how Nuxt treats the things that were provided to the Nuxt app dynamically. So that's why instead of just Medusa, we need to go with $Medusa. And next, what we can do is we can just, let's say, console log this $Medusa to see if it works. So let's save it. And in here, we see that there is already some configuration for this Medusa client. So what we need to do right now is we need to actually fetch some products from this Medusa client. So how will we do that is we will go with, we'll do something like this. So we say const products equals this Medusa products list. And this list is basically the same method that you can search in Medusa documentation, products, and in here you will have list method that basically retrieves a list of products. So we also need to add await here because this is like async operation. And right now, when we try to log those products, we should see the actual products in our playground. So let's refresh the page and we see some products. So we were able to create this approach to fetch the products, but in order to make it more easy for the user to use, because this approach works, but it can be done in a more, let's say, view-friendly way, we could create a composable, which is a function that would do essentially very similar thing as we did here, but in a more view-friendly way. And we could also then utilize another feature of Nuxt and Nuxt modules, which is auto import, that basically allows you to register this auto imported composable or component, and then the user wouldn't have to import it manually. It will just work. So in the runtime, what I will do is I will create a new folder called composables, and inside of it, I will say useMedusaClient.ts. So this will be a composable, so it will be a function. So I will say export const useMedusaClient, which won't accept any parameters, but it will return Medusa. And this Medusa will be basically the type of Medusa from Medusa.js package, like this. So in here, to access Medusa, we needed to do something like this. And in here, we will do something similar. So I will copy this line. we will access this useMedusa. We will access this $Medusa, sorry, and we would need to also import the use Nuxt app. So import use Nuxt app, but this time it won't be from Nuxt app. It will be from hashtag imports, like this. So we will have access to this Medusa, and we will just return the Medusa, just like this. So this won't work yet. We need to register this composable in the module. So how it is done is, in here, what I need to do is I will need to use another functionality from NuxtKit, which is actually called add imports dir, which basically will add auto import directory or all files in the directory. So in here I need to pass the directory, so it will be resolve, and in here I will pass the directory of runtime, which I will create something like this just beneath here. Let's import it from URL. So I will use this runtime dir, and I will pass another property here, which will be composables. So this line will mean that I want to auto import everything that is in the composables folder. So in my case it is just one file, but in the future I might have more. So let's save it. Let's rerun the building of the project and run yarn dev. And right now in the app, we should be able to use this newly created useMedusaClient. So I will say const client equals useMedusaClient. And this client, right now I should be able to just use this and have the same result. And we have the products. So right now into those tips and tricks, because we were able to create some simple module where we have utilized the generation of the Medusa client in the plugin, and we have also auto-imported the Medusa client so that it's a more user-friendly and view-friendly way to access the client. But let's now talk a bit about the good practices and good patterns when building modules. So what is a good practice for the module itself is, for example, to have the documentation. So documentation in Nuxt modules is usually created with the docus tool. So if you search for docus.dev, this is a great tool for building a documentation for your Nuxt modules, where you have a lot of components that you can use, like the alerts, block heroes, some kind of code blocks, just like this one. You have the terminal and stuff like that. So it's easy to show the user how to utilize your module. Next up is the StackBlitz. So StackBlitz demo for your module. By having this and providing a link to it, such as the one here, Play Online, user will be able to try your module without any setup needed. So he will just go to StackBlitz and then they can try whether your module works for them or not. We have also a folder here for the tests, where we can define some tests for our application. It is very important to create those tests so that you can make sure that with each new version of your module, there are no regressions or there are no bugs introduced. So those tests will help you achieve that.